Why on earth would we want an outside body of bureaucrats to determine America's health policies, especially one like who that is prone to influence by China?
I guess I would say that the initial lockdown was driven by, in my opinion, several factors. One is a very scary report from Imperial College London that I think was inaccurate. Number two, one of the rare instances where Western free democracies took lessons from totalitarian communist regimes because we learned lockdown was an option from them. Three, I think it is also linked to the death of D.A. Henderson, who eradicated smallpox. He's a very prominent public health figure. He had died prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. He was, I think, in his 90s. Why is that important? I think he fundamentally would have opposed such a restriction. You know, you had a confluence of factors. You had people who happened to have the ear of the White House. Of course, Trump was president at the time. You had a very fearful report that came out of London. You had horrific stories coming out of Lombardy and Wuhan. It's the stories of near hospital collapse. And politicians, when they fear a situation, they don't want to be seen as weak. They want to be seen as reactive. And somebody's whispering in their ear, you're going to have 1 million dead people if you don't do this right now. That was a tough decision. Now, some politicians, I think, were quick to realize the error. So I think DeSantis is one. Within 6 weeks, DeSantis said, I think perhaps we've overreacted. He was getting some different opinions. He was the first to reopen schools in the spring of 2020. He quickly took away any restrictions on businesses. And as you point out, Florida does not appear to have done age-adjusted, per capita adjusted, much differently than other places, even like California. Now, your point about turning over the authority to WHO, I think would be mistaken. I think that one of the challenges the pandemic revealed is what is the job of a scientist and what is the job of people? The scientist's job is to tell you what the trade-offs are. If you choose this treatment, what's the pluses and minuses? If you choose no treatment, pluses and minuses. If you choose to lock down schools, pluses and minuses. I can tell you how many kids will lose a year of education and how many, I can tell you those things. But it's not the job of the scientist to make the decision, should we do that? That's a decision that only people make. And the electrician's opinion is as important as the doctor's opinion. It's a societal decision. And so I do think those decisions have to be made by politics. That's a political decision, how you choose to act upon trade-offs. I think that scientists took away the choice from people through this pandemic, through misleading messaging, being overconfident, and falsely articulating the trade-offs. If I tell you if schools were open, all the kids would be dead, you would say, close the schools. But if I told you the reality that the risk to kids is so very, very low and the risk of closure is so very, very high, you might choose differently. My job is to tell you the honest truth, but only people can make these votes.
Well, it seems like the politicians and certainly the media were amplifying the negatives and never spoke about the other side of the medical issues that we're now reading about.
Can I say one thing about the media? We talk about the media. These are people who, and I want to say one thing, which is I don't think anyone working in the hospital is ill-intentioned. I don't think people working in the media are ill-intentioned, but we have to acknowledge their role. If I have a kind of job where I can work on Zoom, I will never be fired. I can do my full job on Zoom from the comforts of my home, having Uber Eats deliver me food, which most people who work at Washington Post and New York Times and CNN have that luxury. I'm not the same vantage point as someone who's a truck driver, who works in a slaughterhouse, who has to go work the field, who has a job where you have to show up in person. You can't phone that in. You can't do that on Zoom. And so I do think the media has had a warped view of COVID because they have a job where they don't have to go anywhere.
So it's good for everybody. That's what they're thinking.
Correct.